Hi there, my name is Karen Rodriguez, and I'm a software engineering intern on the Wildfly Electron team at Red Hat. This is a short tutorial on some useful Git topics. We're going to talk about how to add the upstream to your local repository so that you can track changes being made, how to rebase your changes onto the upstream so that it's easier to merge them in, as well as how to deal with merge conflicts in case there are any problems. This is being posted on the Wildfly channel, and we have other videos, including a playlist on useful Git topics like this one, demos of different features you can find at Wildfly, and other content. If any of that is interesting, then consider subscribing. So the first thing we're going to look at is adding upstreams to your local repository. The upstream is the term given to the repository that you originally forked from. So the idea is that content and updates flows from that upstream into all of the downstreams, which includes your own repo that you have here. The first thing we need to do then is we need to figure out if we even have the upstream or if we only have our own remote repo. So we can run git remote and then add this v flag, which stands for verbose, so we can see what the URLs are. And we can see that right now there's only one right now, called origin. This is what you originally cloned it down onto your local machine from. It appears twice because you have fetch for pulling changes down and push for pushing them back. So now that we know that it's not here, we actually need to go over to the browser and get the URL of the upstream. So now that we're here on GitHub, we can see that this is where it was actually originally cloned from. You've just got my username and then the name of the repository on the remote, which is GitHub in this case. We can also see where we originally forked it from. So we can just click here and go back to the upstream. And now we can click on the code button and you can see that we actually have the URL in order to track the upstream. So we're going to copy this and then we're going to paste it into our terminal. So now what we can do is we can add this as a new remote, and this time we're going to add as the upstream. So same as before, we'll start with git remote. This time it's going to be add, and you can give this whatever name you want, but usually it's easiest to remember if you use the name upstream. So we'll call it that. And then we're going to paste the link that we got earlier. And now, if we hit enter, we can see that we have a new upstream. So to check this, you can just run the same command as we did at the start, which is git remote v. And you can see that now we actually have two remotes. We have origin, same as before, but we also have upstream. And you can see that upstream is Wildfly security, which is the upstream in this case. And it means that we'll actually be able to track our changes right here. So now that we have our upstream, let's try to rebase our changes onto that upstream. So I'm here in a different repo, and if I do git log, then we can see that I've made one change in this repo, which I just called my first commit. I can then do git show, and it'll actually show me the details of that change. So here we can see that I've just changed one of the lines to note that this is my forked repo. So I'm going to use a slightly different command here. This one is git log. Again, it's going to be all, but I'm going to add this other flag called graph. And what this does is it helps to visualize it by creating these different splits here. So you can see that we've actually forked off from the original. You can see that this is us. And if we do a search for the other one, which in this case was called upstream, because that's the name of our remote, and then 1.x, then we can see that it's all the way down here. And we've actually forked off from it quite a bit. So let's exit this view, and we'll clear the screen to make it easier to see. And the command in this case is called git rebase. So what it does is you specify what branch you want to rebase onto, and then it takes all of your commits from when they last were together, and then it tries to replay them on top so that you have a linear history. So we're going to make sure that we're on the right branch, and we can see that this is our local. And now we're going to do git rebase, and we're going to specify what we want to rebase onto. Now, because it's on the upstream remote, we're going to specify that it's the upstream. We're going to do a / and then the branch, which is going to be 1.x. And if we hit enter, then we'll see that it's successfully rebased and updated the refs. Now we can do git log again. You can now see that here's our change, the head, at 1.x, and here's the upstream, which is just one commit behind. So now that we've been able to rebase onto the main, one thing that you might know is generally if you're working on a feature, you want to work on it in a separate branch and then try to merge it in afterwards. So the command changes slightly if you're doing that, but it's otherwise very similar. So we can just try that out now. So now we're in a different repo, and we can see that we also have a different branch. So let's figure out what's going on. Let's run git branch. Okay, now we can see that we have two branches, the 1.x branch from before, and this new one called my feature branch. Let's see what changes have been made here. Let's look at the log, and now we can see that there's been one commit recently, and it's currently based off of the old version, the one from January of the 1.x branch. We want to make sure that our changes are always rebased on the latest version so that it's easy to merge them in. So what we're going to do is first we're going to switch to the 1.x branch and pull down all the changes so that we can make sure that our local branch is up to date. And then we'll rebase onto that one so that everything's always up to date. So let's switch over to the branch. We'll run git checkout, and then the branch 1.x. And now let's pull down our changes. We can do git pull, but because we want to pull from the upstream and not the origin, which is our default, we need to specify the remote this time, as well as the branch. So we're going to specify upstream, and then the branch 1.x. And now if we were to run git log, we can see that our local is exactly lined up with the upstream, which is great. So now we can rebase onto it. So let's go back to our other branch with git checkout, and then my feature branch. And now let's rebase onto our local 1.x because it's the same as the upstream. So we'll do git rebase 1.x. And there we go. Now let's look at the log again. And we can see that we have the upstream and the local at the exact same position, and then our feature branch with our one commit sitting on top of it. Now we need to deal with actually getting your changes into the main branch, which is dealing with what you might sometimes run into, which is a merge conflict. What Git usually does is it tries to take the two sides of the commit, and then it'll put them together neatly. It'll figure out which side it should take, which one it shouldn't. But in some cases, especially if both branches have made changes to the same lines, then Git can actually figure out which one you want to keep, and it'll hand control back to you so you can specify which one it should keep and which one it should throw away. So let's take a look at one of those scenarios now. If we run git log and we add the all flag, we can see what's been happening. And we can see that there are some changes between the 1.x and the my feature branch, but they don't quite line up as usual. So now, let's try to merge it. We'll run git merge my feature branch. So let's see what's happened. We can run git status. And we can see that there are unmerged paths due to some conflicts. We have a couple options. We could just abort the changes here if we want, or we could take a look at these and try to resolve them. So let's try that. So we'll take a look at first the README, and we'll open that in an editor. I'm going to use Vim, but feel free to use whichever editor you want. The actual one doesn't matter for this part. Now, the first thing we want to do is we want to try to find the changes. The easiest way to find it is to search for one of these parts. So I'm just going to do it here, but left arrow space and then head is usually a good way to find it. So you can see that there are two blocks of code here. This first one, the head, is the one that was already in the 1.x branch, and this is the one from the branch we're trying to merge in, my feature branch. And you can actually see that they're different and they're on the same line. So we need to figure out which one of these we want to keep. Now, the way to change this is pretty straightforward. You just delete the lines you don't want to keep, including these extra ones that have been added in by Git. And then I'm going to get rid of this line first, this headline, because we don't want to keep that around, as well as this other middle line, and then this one. And let's say that we want to focus on the fact that this was just my forked repo. So let's get rid of the new feature line. All right, there we go. And that's all the changes. So now let's see if there's any more of those lines. We'll again search for left arrow space head, and we can see that there are no finds. So that means that this file is done. So now, save your changes, and make sure to add it as if you were committing it. So we're going to go git add readme.md. And now if we run git status, we can see that one of those files has been resolved and it doesn't even appear anymore. So now we need to take those same steps and repeat it for all of the modified files. All right, now if we do git status, we can see that's it. We just need to make a new commit here. So we'll create a commit and we'll give it a name. Let's say merging my feature branch. And there we go. Now if we look at git log, we can see that we have this new merged one and all the issues have been resolved. Now, depending on what editor or IDE that you're using, you might have access to a few other tools. Let's say that we have a merge conflict, but we're making some changes in VS Code. If you go to the source control tab and you click on this section, then you'll see that you have a different interface. And here it'll actually highlight the changes, and then you can click on these checkboxes to choose which changes you want to keep, and then you can add them to the merge. And once you're done, you'll just be able to commit it through here or through the terminal as usual. And that's it. So we've gone over how to add the upstream to your local repo, how to rebase your changes onto the upstream, and how to merge in your changes and deal with merge conflicts in case you run into them. Hopefully you found this video useful. I'll include a link in the description to the rest of the Git Topics playlist. And if you're interested in content like this and more, then subscribe to the Wildfly channel. Thanks for watching.